You're listening to episode 5 of the On Being Human podcast.
Welcome to the On Being Human podcast, where we believe transforming ourselves can positively transform society. Your host, Brandy Fleck, has the honor of exploring the human condition with real people who bravely share their personal stories of adversity, healing, joy, and more. If you're seeking empowerment, strength, and inspiration, listen in to engage and explore tough topics that help us humanize one another, understand ourselves better, spread love, and connect.
This week's guest, Carmen Gosa, was a social worker focusing on child welfare for about 12 years. She spent time working to reunite families, and if the families couldn't satisfy their plans to correct actions, she worked to find children stable, permanent families. Carmen also assisted 18 and older youth who had come out of the foster system needing support for how to transition into adulthood, go to college, and more. Carmen eventually experienced compassion fatigue and burnout, as many in social work can. In this episode, she opens up about how it's hard work trying to not become attached to some of the people you work with, and it's hard not to become attached to the outcomes. Some outcomes were positive and some were negative. Carmen had to learn how to accept how her actions impacted families, hold on to the positive outcomes, and learn how to grieve. Carmen truly has a servant's heart. After the compassion fatigue and burnout were too much, she changed her entire life by joining the military, still serving but in a different way, and gaining more confidence than ever. She loves her friends and family, loves learning and expanding her skills, and is currently living in California by way of Tennessee. So let's dive in to see how Carmen experiences serving humanity, how that impacts her personal relationships, and discuss the healing that occurs while serving. Hi, Carmen. Welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm excited to have you here because over the years that I've gotten to know you, I've sort of thought that you are a servant to humanity and you really have a servant's heart. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your life and some of the things you've done for humanity and yourself and society. And do you see yourself as a servant?
I didn't really see myself that way until the past few years when I started getting more confidence in myself and seeing kind of how I've had a pattern of jobs and interests that have been around that kind of servant's mission. So it's been over the past few years I've kind of seen myself as realized that that's kind of who I am.
Okay. How did you mentioned gaining confidence in yourself. For one, how did you start gaining confidence in yourself? And for two, how did that help you realize what your mission in life was?
Well, I think I started getting confidence a few years ago. I had been at my previous job for a while, and it started to click for me. I started to feel confident in what I was doing there, and then it really changed the past few years when I kind of challenged myself when I joined the military, and realized kind of what my strengths were and some things I needed to work on, of course, but just really testing myself and my limits and just kind of seeing what I was made of. It kind of helped me to realize that I was kind of I had more confidence in myself. And then in terms of the servant part, just feeling that call to serve in the military, not just from the family tradition of it, but just that call within myself. You know, this is my country. I feel like I can contribute something.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit about what your previous job was and then how you made a transition from that into the military?
Okay. So when I graduated college, I went into child welfare. So I got a job with the Department of Children's Services, and I was the social worker there for a while, for about 12 years. And so I kind of moved around within the agency doing different things. And then, you know, that's a hard, stressful job. And a few years ago, it was about my 11-year mark, I was just feeling very burned out. There's a term called compassion fatigue, where you start struggling to feel empathy for others because you're just overwhelmed with people's stress and suffering.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I started to start feeling that, like I wasn't feeling motivated for my job. I was getting to the point where I felt like I might be uncaring, and I didn't want that to prohibit my effectiveness as a worker. So I had looked at the military, but I was only looking at the reserves. I was like, I just need something to kind of give me a break from what I'm doing, give me some extra money, and it would also, I was hoping it would be a benchmark to a new career in a different field, such as my focus was kind of on medicine. So that was what I looked at. And then when I was talking with the recruiter, I learned about some other opportunities, and I was able to get an opportunity to go forward as a full-time support. So I can get to actually travel and be stationed like active duty people are instead of reservists.
Great. So you're in the military full-time right now, correct?
Yes, I am. So for the military, I'm what they call an electronics technician. So I went to school to learn how to work on like electronics. And so I learned a lot about voltage and stuff like that. So I was trained to be working in like a repair shop and things like that to fix whatever communications equipment goes down. But I ended up in a different community where I'm more focused on like radios and satellite communications. So I'm basically in a teaching unit. So I go out and we teach other squadrons how to use their comms equipment.
You definitely did do sort of like a full change in career. What made you go into that first line of work with social work and the Department of Children's Services?
That was actually kind of a spur of the moment kind of realization. I was traditionally in college, I was a pre-med major, but the chemistry and calculus and stuff were kind of, I was really struggling in those subjects, and I kind of got downhearted. Well, I had started making social work my minor for that degree. So when I switched to psychology for my degree, I kept social work as a minor. And my last semester of school, I took a class called Child Welfare, Introduction to Child Welfare, and that's where I learned about, you hear about the foster care system, but I actually learned a little bit more about how it worked and the types of populations they dealt with. And I became curious about it. And so when I graduated that summer, or that December, I put in an application for the Department of Children's Services and ended up getting hired a couple months later as a caseworker.
Wow. So I think that's really awesome. Do you mind describing for us a little bit what all that entailed and things that you had to do on that job that were, I guess, fairly difficult?
Sure. So a lot of it was fairly difficult in the beginning, just figuring out how to be a working adult straight out of college. Plus, social work involves a lot of talking to people, and at that time in my life, I couldn't even make small talk with people. That was really challenging for me, was figuring out how to interview people, and because the first thing you need to be as a social worker is somebody that people can talk to, and to do that, you have to talk to them. So figuring all that out was a bit challenging. But it got better. But over the years, I kind of worked in different jobs. So my first role really was as a custody case manager. So my role was, if a child was in foster care, then I would have to, I would work to put them back with their birth parents. So we would have like a plan of services that the family would complete, and there'd be counseling or whatever services needed to identify what brought the child in custody. And then I would work to make them, to give them the support they needed to complete that plan. And then we would just review their progress, and, over time it depended on whether or not they could reunify with their children, or if we had to look at other options for that child to have some kind of permanent family.
Okay.
And then I went on from there. I went into, I worked with our post-custody youth, which are children that have turned 18 while they were in foster care, and they were looking to go to college or get support on their own as a young adult. Most people don't realize that, children between the ages of 18 to 24 are still struggling, even though they're legally an adult. They have no support if they come out of foster care to pursue a life as an adult. So.
That's a really good point. Were there ever times in either of these two roles where you had a hard time staying detached from the situation?
Oh, yeah. In certain ways. I mean, sometimes it was just, how do I put this? Sometimes you could really identify with a case, whether it's, you felt really upset with the birth family and it was really hard to maintain that professionalism because, some of the cases, the families had done some pretty bad things to their children. And it's hard to separate that from, I have to help this family work through their issues because you feel the pain of what they did to that child. So that was sometimes hard to detach from. There were other times too, where the family was, I've had a couple of families that were very angry. It's understandable. Your child comes into foster care and some families react with anger. And so it was hard to detach in those cases because, you felt a little bit intimidated or scared for what they might do to you or, they'd make threats and things like that. So you kind of take that home with you.
So you could identify with a case. You would be upset with the birth family or, because they had done things to the children. So was there ever a time when you had an internal struggle of you were supposed to be reuniting this family, but you didn't want to? And how did you deal with that?
It was really hard at times when a lot of the times if that was happening, it was out of our hands. It was a decision made by the court, presented by the attorneys. That's kind of the legal stuff that we aren't able to really control. All we can do is testify to what we try to do for the family and whether or not they responded to us about those services. So at the times when, a decision was made that I didn't agree with, it was really hard to sleep at night, especially it depended on why the child had come into custody in the first place. Obviously, some cases are more concerning than others in terms of reunification. So all I could do was really just, know that I had done everything I could to advocate for that child and to work with that family and know that I had done my best. And that's all I could do at the end of the day. And then there were a few sleepless nights. The good thing about those kinds of decisions is typically we have input afterward. The case is still open. We can still go out and make visits and see how the progress is going. And that would help mitigate it in my mind. I knew that I'd be able to go out, in a week or so and see how things were going and still be able to give my, opinion on how it was going and know that I was still able to advocate for that child after a decision like that had been made.
That's good. Yeah. So were there times that a decision had been made for reunification and you went back out and then it was reversed?
Yes.
Okay. And so to turn the tables a little bit to a more positive side of things, what kind of impact did you see that you had on these children's lives when they were, put back with their families or they got support to go to college and become productive adults? Were you able to see the positive impact you had in their lives?
The good thing is, because I was there so long, I did see the positive too. I saw the adoptions. Those were the best part of our job, was seeing that a child had permanency with an adoptive family, whether that was a relative that had adopted them or a foster parent that had adopted them. They had some kind of, stability, and we knew they were in good families. And then there was reunification cases. I saw there were some parents that would come out there and it was like wake-up call for them. And they would work their plan. They were motivated. They addressed whatever had happened, and we were able to reunify with them, and we never heard from them again. Like they didn't come back to the system later on. Like we would know that they were good and happy and healthy. And then as far as the older children, that one was harder. Teenagers tend to make a lot of rash impulse decisions. So every now and then there were the young adults that were able to actually prove that they could, they would commit to college, or they would commit to their trade school or whatever they were doing to for their future. So there were those that did contribute and actually worked to become an independent and part of society, and just, they were able to find people as an adult that while they couldn't be adopted, they were kind of like enfolded into the family, or they had good friend support system, things like that.
real quick, just to give a little background for maybe some people who don't know much about the foster care system and things like that, can you tell us what are some of the reasons that children would be placed into the foster system, and what would allow someone to be reunified with their family versus not?
So it's been, I've data dumped a little bit of it over the years. But as far as coming into custody, there's what happens is if something happens, it's not always like a law enforcement case. It could be just if somebody is accused, there's a CPS investigation. If somebody makes an allegation, if that investigation is investigated, then then if it turns out that there's nothing that they can do except bringing the child in custody in order to prevent whatever's happening from happening, then that's what happens. So it was always a last resort. Like, nobody ever wants to put a child in state custody. So if a child came into state custody, it was usually because somebody from DCS had been working with them previously about some kind of identified need, and they weren't responding, or the child was in immediate danger from that family or from anybody else that the family was letting near them.
Okay.
Or if there was some kind of law enforcement if the parents, sometimes we got parents that got arrested and they had no one to care for the children and they were going to be in jail for a while, things like that.
Okay.
So that's how you could come in. And for reunification, in terms of that or not, like I said, there's a permanency plan that they work. If they make progress on it, then they can work towards reunification. If they don't participate in it, or they don't do what's on the plan, or they keep making decisions not in support of reunification, then that's when the court looks at other options for that child to go to. And there's a time frame for that. We don't want a child in custody, longer than a year or two if we can help it.
So does that permanency plan, is it customized per family, or are there standard things that everybody has to do?
It's the standard things are more like medical and dental stuff for the child. We want every child to have the medical and dental care they need for their age and things like that.
Okay.
But as far as services, a lot of them look alike because a lot of our families kind of have the same issues. But the purpose of the meeting that's held right after a child comes into custody is to develop that plan with the family's input. With anybody who's involved in that child's life comes to that meeting, and they all have an input in developing that plan. And then the parents have, the parents have to kind of review it and make sure it incorporates what they want as far as we can put it in there. I mean, they sign off on it, is what I'm trying to say. So they're very aware of what the department is asking them to do. And a lot of the times they actually identify what services they would benefit from, and those services will end up on the plan, so it feels like their plan too, which is what it is, kind of is.
Yeah, that's great, because I guess the more buy-in you have, you are having to dictate things to them, but on the other hand, if they have a say in it, they're probably more likely to go along with it, I would imagine. Let's shift a little bit into sort of the impact on your life. I mean, I know we discussed it a little bit, but how has the service that you've provided to people in different ways impacted your close personal relationships?
It's been actually a pretty hard impact, and not in a horribly bad way, but when I was a caseworker, you kind of get that job has long hours, you're on call, you're stressed out a lot. It was hard for me to kind of, first of all, it was hard to find time to do things with my friends and my family. It was really hard to carve out time. And when I did spend time with them, it was hard I was stressed. So it was hard. Most of my time was just kind of relaxing and chilling by myself because I needed to decompress before I tried to interact and have fun with other people. And if they weren't social workers, they didn't understand what I was going through. So it was hard to talk about my job and de-stress that way. Because they didn't really have a frame of reference for what I was discussing.
Right.
The only thing with the military is that I'm just so far away, so it's kind of hard sometimes when they need me to be there. The time difference, the distance apart. been a little rough on them too.
Okay, that definitely makes sense. Um, do you get time off? Like, do you get to see your family? How does that work?
Yeah, I'm still learning it, and it's been a process. But I have seen them. I saw them. It's become a regular thing to see them at Christmas, and most of the military is usually pretty good about a holiday stand down, where you have time to, if you can, your command will let you go and spend the holidays with people, or do what you need to do for that holiday leave. And then I'm actually figuring out how. My command is really good. I'm at a shore command, so it's not quite the same as people that are out to sea and have to deploy a lot. But my command is very committed to personal time. So a lot of us, you just put in leave like you would any other job. You're like, I need to take these 2 weeks off or whatever. And they're usually pretty responsive to it as long as it doesn't interfere with what we're doing.
Gotcha. So it's an interesting dynamic. So we've talked about the impact that it's had on your close personal relationships, and then you're impacted, but they're also impacted. So on sort of a more macro level, just based on things you've observed in your different roles and in your own personal life, what impact do you think close personal relationships have on people in general, and how does that impact their mental and emotional health, basically?
I think it's a very good impact as long as it's a good relationship that you have. Because there's some close personal relationships that are kind of not good for one or both of the parties in it. But if you have a good, strong relationship with somebody, and a close personal friend, a family member, or mentor, anything like that, I think in general it tends to make people, you can relax within yourself. And I think people that feel supported, that feel like they have people they can talk to, or the people that can be there for them when they need them, that makes people ultimately trust themselves a little bit more. And I feel like that makes for them to contribute to whatever part of the world they're doing, whatever they're doing in their life, they make it better because they have people that make their lives better.
Taking that a step further, did you see people, or, do you now see people experience healing and things like that? And is that more of a solitary thing, or does that involve close personal relationships? And did you have to go through healing yourself after you transitioned to the military from social work?
So, yeah, I did see healing. Like I said, there were some families that it was a wake-up call. They realized what they had done, circumstances that they had, decisions they had made, how it affected the people in their life, not just their children being removed from them, but like their family dynamics got changed, things like that. So to see them, the ones that were able to get the help they needed and to accept that help and to work on improving things, to see them reunify with their children. You could see their progress in counseling with their child and how that bond grew stronger. You could see how the family support that they had, got past the rocky times in the beginning. So you could see that. You could also see it personally for like that, if that family member had like a drug problem or something like that, you could see their acceptance and realizing they had an issue and an addiction and working past that and staying sober and things like that. And even the families that ended up having to, they made the decision to surrender their parental rights. While that's a hard choice that they made it for their child. They knew that they were not able to parent that child. And to me, those are some of the strongest people too, because they recognized that their child was hurting and that they wanted that child to be with a permanent family that could actually support them and take care of them. Yeah. And then as far as when I left social work, was that the question? Like learning to heal myself?
Yes. Like when you left, did you have to go through healing?
I had to go through a little bit. Not only was it just a life change itself, but it was learning how to process everything I'd been through. Because I was kind of living that life day to day. And like I'd seen some of the impact it had on me and I could recognize it, but it wasn't until I was doing another job, doing something different, that I was able to really see overall how being a social worker had affected me, both in good ways and in negative ways. So I had to learn how to live with the choices that I had made in that work, and some of the decisions I made, and just the stuff I'd been through. One of the biggest things I had to learn how to do, not just when I left social work, but while I was in it, was just learning how to grieve. Because sometimes, unfortunately, there were people in my life, there were children, there were foster parents that had passed away. And so you have this relationship with those people, and then one day they're gone. And so just learning how to handle that loss and move on.
That's some really big stuff, I think. What were some of the techniques or just things you did to process those experiences?
A lot of it really, honestly, and this is no disrespect to everybody I worked with, but just I had to turn it off for a while. Like I said, I'd mentioned the compassion fatigue. I was so overwhelmed by all the feelings, all the suffering, everything. I started to not care about people anymore. I was like, this is not good. So the cool thing, I mean, I don't know about cool, but it was helpful that I was immersed from that job. My last day was like in March, and like 2 weeks later, I was in boot camp. So I had time to, in boot camp, you focus on day to day. So I had kind of shut off that stuff. So by the time I was able to actually start, when I got out of boot camp and was starting to learn how to be a sailor, I was able to kind of think back on what I had done, and I'd kind of remove myself a little bit. So that's what allowed me to kind of, like you said, introspect and just kind of reflect on what I had done, and also realize what I was, I had newfound confidence in myself after completing boot camp and realizing, okay, yeah, this is what happened. This is how you dealt with it. You did this A, Y, and Z, at the time, and it was a good decision that you made, and things like that. So it was really just reflecting back on it is the biggest thing, and coming to terms with acceptance of, there were a couple times I made bad decisions. I was still learning. I was young, and sometimes we don't make the best decisions for our job, and I had to kind of accept what I had failed to do for some of my families.
So I heard you say words like acceptance and reflection and just, stepping away from the situation for a while in order to gain more clarity. Is that what it means to heal? Or is there another definition or aspect of healing that we should talk about? I mean, what does it mean to heal?
Gotcha. I think it's kind of what I was saying. To me, healing is like, you don't ever really forget what you went through, but it kind of dullens over time. And being, I think somebody that's been able to heal from whatever traumatic experience that they've gone through or something, they've been able to kind of work through it, through the emotions that came with it, through anything that they felt they could have done differently, and they get to a place where it's not hindering their ability to function. You're able to kind of look back on it and be like, okay, that happened. This is what I learned from it. This is what I may do again to prevent it from happening. This is what I might do to prevent it from getting that far. And also and it's not just in terms of like losing a loved one, but just in terms of having made a bad decision, a mistake in your life, treated somebody unfairly or wrong. Anything that you've done that's kind of doesn't sit well with you, just being able to kind of work with that and figure it out for yourself how to do better in the future. And I think people that heal can openly talk about it. They can talk about what they went through. They're kind of open with how it with their understanding of the situation. They're not trying to deflect it or deny that it happened or things like that.
That's really good stuff. That makes a lot of sense to me. Personally, I know a lot of people that have agreed to be guests on this show have gone through healing because they are very open about talking about their experiences. How can people find healing?
I think that's a hard question to answer because I think it's different for everyone. For me, it's just I'm more of an introspective person. So for me, I find healing in, like we talked about, just kind of reflecting and processing and things like that. I think other people need support. They need somebody they can talk to, whether it's a counselor, whether it's a close friend that, understands their situation, support groups. I think so for people that like that, or even people that are more introspective too, just kind of knowing where their resources are and being able to actually taking the steps to utilize them. I think healing doesn't happen unless you make an active, some kind of conscious effort to heal. You can't, if you're stuck in that, traumatic cycle of reliving the traumatic event over and over again, you're not going to really heal until you make a decision to break that cycle in your mind and actually seek whatever it is you need to process it and get through the motions and actually find yourself on the other side of them.
Do you have any tips for breaking that cycle of reliving that traumatic experience?
Knowing what your resources are, who you can call, and just making the effort, like in your mind, just knowing it's okay. We've all been through something, and just trying to accept that within yourself. Everybody has things in their past they're not proud of, and the only way to move on from them is to heal from them and to know that, the first step is knowing that, okay, I did this, but it doesn't define who I am, and I'm going to go get the help I need to find out who I really am and things like that.
Right. And I mean, nobody can do it for you. Like, even if you have all the support in the world, the healing sort of begins within you, is what I'm hearing you say. Is that right?
Yeah, that's kind of my thought with it. Yeah.
We've talked a lot about healing and serving and sort of the ins and outs of social work and then your transition to the military. So at this point in time, as a culmination of all your experiences, what do you believe the most important thing in life is?
That's hard to put down in like a one-word answer or something like that. I mean, I don't want to sound cliche or anything, but I think it's kind of like love and respect. And I think it's multifold. It's, you could loving, just a stranger, just as a fellow human, somebody that's on this earth with you, you can love them by just being friendly. Hello, how you doing, and then all the way to the different spectrums of love, your family, your friends, if you're in a significant relationship with whoever, just having that love and respect for people, I think is important, because that's where everything kind of starts. If you don't raise your children to show that to other people, they're going to grow up and contribute negatively to things, because they don't have a respect and love for the people that they're with. And I just feel like that's an important thing. And not only does it help in terms of, like I said, growing up and learning how to work with people, but it helps, I think, better people, because people react to being treated with love and respect in a more positive way. And like I said before, it kind of contributes overall. Like, I don't know if there's certain terms that you call it, paying it forward. I don't know, something like that. But like, I can see that that's like a chain. When you express love and kindness and respect to somebody, they react in kind, and then they might, it might change how they react to people, and then it's just like this chain reaction of
right, like a ripple effect.
That's the word, yeah. That kind of, it spreads out, and I think that's what contributes most, and I think that's what's important, because that's where all your societal contributions, that's where your happiness in home, happiness with your job or whatever, I think it all kind of spirals out from just being treated like that.
That's good stuff, Carmen. I really agree. Love and respect are really powerful things, I think, and without them, it's just hard. It's hard to eat, to do other stuff. So then let's go into, what does being human mean to you?
Yeah, I've thought about this a few times. I guess, like I said, I've kind of been reflecting on it the past few years, and I've kind of learned who I was and my place in this world. I think just being human is realizing that, each person realizing that for themselves. How am I here? What can I do to make this world better for the people behind me? And what can I do to expand upon in a respectful manner what's been done before me. And just, I just feel like I just have so much respect. Like, I love astronomy and things like that. Just to think that, not only are we just in our little hometowns and parts of the world, but we're like part of a whole galaxy. And I think, all the stuff lately, they're talking about new galaxies forming and things like that. It just kind of reminds me that, we're just a small part of like a bigger scheme. And for me, anyway, that's my personal thing. And I know, for me, religion is important. I have a very spiritual respect for life and just how it was created and things like that. And I feel like being human is just recognizing, even if you're not religious, just recognizing that we're all in kind of the same struggle. We all have the same struggles. We all have the same hopes and fears. Some just different than others, but it's all pretty much the same general scheme. And just being able to recognize that in people and treat them, like I said, with the love and respect, it kind of helps make everybody feel like they're part of this world, they're part of a society, they're part of a loving place, and being appreciative of what blessings I've been given and what we're given, and being able to share whatever parts of ourselves that we can share with other people to make this world a better place. I think that's kind of what being human is all about.
That's great. Thank you so much. And before we stop here, I just want to say, do you think you've recovered from your compassion fatigue?
Oh yeah, I'm much better now.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, not to expound too much on it, but just in terms of part of my healing from that was realizing it's okay to not be everything to everybody, all at once. You got to know what your limits are and know what you're strong at, and try not to overextend yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's helped a lot, is realizing not only that I was doing that, but also that I had more to give than I thought I did. And now that I've found more confidence in sharing myself with others, being able to care about them again is a great feeling.
Oh, that's good. That makes me have a couple more questions for you. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So it brings me to, you said you have more to give than you thought you did. And that brings us sort of full circle to being a servant and having a servant's heart. So can you tell us what you think it means to be a servant and what defines having a servant's heart?
So kind of, well, to tie on kind of what I was saying first, it just, like I feel like when I'm able to share myself, I can share not only what I've come across, but just what I've been through. So I feel like when I'm able to share mistakes I've made and what I learned from them, or if I share, at a time I felt insecure, but this is how I overcame it, I feel like that's helping whoever I'm talking to. It might help them make their life a little bit better. And so I feel like I'm sharing, knowledge with them, or I'm like, as a teacher in my current role, it feels good to teach people things. I've kind of realized I'm kind of a teacher in that aspect. I like to see people learn, and however I can present that to them, it makes me feel good to know that they're getting some kind of aspect back from it. And I think having a servant's heart is just kind of having that mindset in terms of, what can I do today to make somebody else's life better, without sacrificing your own life, but just being able to share your blessings with other people when they've asked for help, or if you see that they might be struggling, if there's a kind word you can give them, just, in that moment, to make them kind of maybe have a little bit of hope. And I think it's just being humble. I mean, I joke around a lot, and I like to, and stuff, but at heart, I'm really humble. Like, I don't like being praised. I don't, I think people that are true servants, they do it for how, for feeling like they're making life better, not for how they feel about themselves, in doing it. So I think it's just that kind of mindset in terms of wanting to better things based on being able to share your blessings or your lessons with other people.
So, Carmen, at what point in your life did you learn that you were meant to serve people, and how did you figure that out?
So I think we touched upon it a little bit before when I was talking about, just when I got a little more confidence over the years, learning how to share myself with people and be more of a servant to them and serve society as well. But I think kind of it started when I was really young, actually, and I just never really recognized it. But just in looking back, I was the oldest of 4 children. I became used to taking care of people and making, I was an older sister, so I would try to mollify them if they were, crying. I'd try to make them laugh, or I would try to do stuff for them, that they couldn't do for themselves. And then, when I was younger, I remember my first profession I ever wanted to be was a teacher. Like, I was always interested in the helping profession. So I was teaching in college. I was pre-med, and then obviously the social work in the military. So I've seen that pattern there. So it's interesting to me that I've had that kind of, it seems like ingrained in me, and I just didn't really realize it. And I've also, just on a personal level, I've always sought to be independent, and I never really saw that as like a servant thing, but I think it's more of a terms of when I try to be independent, it's because I don't want to be a burden to other people. I want to take care of myself and share myself with people in terms of not being a burden to them, because
Sure.
if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
But do you allow for people to help you too? I mean,
Yes.
Everybody at some point probably needs another person.
Yes. That's the thing. Like, I would let people help. I can be stubborn, but I do let people help me when I really truly need it. And then I just always felt like, because I liked feeling needed. I liked feeling like I was contributing to something better than myself. So over the years, that's just kind of how I've always felt. So.
Well, that's really awesome. Carmen, you've definitely had an interesting life and an interesting path with just a lot of heavy things you've had to deal with. And I appreciate you so much for coming on the show and sharing a little bit of that with us. And just best of luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you so much. It was really a privilege being a part of this.
Okay, guys, lots to think about there with what Carmen had to say. For more information about this episode, go to www.onbeinghuman.podcast.com/episodes/005 and let us know what you think. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Tune in weekly at onbeinghumanpodcast.com for more soul-exposing explorations of what it means to be human. Until next week, love to you all.